again, everyone. We're going to get started in about 3 minutes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I promise we're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're just getting our live stream up and running, so make sure that you're tweeting and engaging with us on social media throughout the event. Thanks.
Hello, hello. Wanted to share the password for the Wi-Fi here. The network is AmScan Foundation, and the password is capital A, M, lowercase m, exclamation point, capital S, C, A, N. So capital A, lowercase m, exclamation point, capital S, lowercase c-a-n. Yeah. Okay, that's the first part. Okay? Then there's an @ and then there's a capital F, lowercase o-n-d, hashtag. Okay. I'm going to read that one more time. I'm going to read that one more time. Capital A, lowercase m, exclamation point, capital S, lowercase c, lowercase a, lowercase n, @, capital F, lowercase o, lowercase u, lowercase n, lowercase d, hashtag. And we'll be getting started momentarily.
All right, did everybody get that password? All right, so we're going to be expecting everybody to be sharing what I know is going to be a very engaging session this afternoon. My name is Patrick Fine. I'm CEO of FHI 360, and it is my great privilege to be able to welcome you to this event and thank you. Thank you for caring about education in emergencies. There's only a couple things I want to say about this topic before we get into the event itself. The first is that we ought to care about education in emergencies because this issue is more important than at any time in any of our lives. As I think most of you or all of you know, there are more people who are displaced by emergencies today than ever before in human history. The length of that displacement is longer than ever before in human history. It's now estimated to be between 17 and 20 years on average that people are displaced. 17 to 20 years is equivalent to the entire childhood and adolescence of a person. So education is critical during that period. The second thing I want to mention, so we need to care about this. And the sad fact is that in humanitarian response, education is often the forgotten stepchild, especially in the first phase of humanitarian response. So it's more important than ever, and I'm happy that we're bringing attention to it today. The second thing I want to mention is because it's important, because these are big, tough, difficult issues, it takes a diversity of viewpoints and partnerships amongst a range of organizations to tackle them. And that's what you're going to hear this afternoon, a diversity of viewpoints, and you'll see the strength of partnerships working together with an education champion from Afghanistan, from the Malala Fund, with a dynamic educator from the Lego Foundation, with a scientist, a data scientist from UNESCO, and then with members of FHI 360's education team. And I want to give a special thanks to my colleagues and to Paul Frizzoli, who you'll meet in just a moment, for the work that they've done to help bring together, build partnerships, and address this critical issue. The final thing I want to say is that we're looking today at a specific aspect of education in emergencies, and that's social and emotional learning. So not only is education in emergencies often the forgotten stepchild, but addressing the trauma that children and their teachers and their families experience when they are displaced truly is a new frontier in our practice. So with that, let me ask Paul to come up and start the event. Thank you very much for being here.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We're very grateful for your participation today. So we had some emergencies arise. We work in education in emergencies. It requires us to be flexible and adaptable in complex situations. Unfortunately, Richard Louis, who is a news anchor at MSNBC, was not able to be here today, so I will be stepping in for Richard. I'm not a journalist, but sometimes I'm a little bit more like a talk show host, so, but I'll try not to be too talk show hosty, I promise. We're trying to practice our own social emotional skills in this crisis that came up. So we ask you to be mindful that we're working things out today. This is really the topic that we're talking about, is social emotional learning. I know there's so many of you in the room who are experts in SEL in terms of practicing SEL, delivering interventions, doing high rigorous research of social emotional learning in crisis contexts. It's an honor to be able to present what we've been learning across this range of partners that are up here today. We're going to be talking about some new frontiers for social emotional learning, and we have some specific call to action points that we would like partners to engage on in the coming years to ensure that we're delivering high quality interventions that really support children's psychosocial development. So with that said, the order of the event today really focuses on setting what this looks like in context. We have the honor to have a Malala Fund champion with us today. Dima is going to talk more about her experience implementing different types of education programs for girls and women in Afghanistan. And then we will hear from our colleagues at the Lego Foundation, who will really talk about the latest evidence that they've been tracking related to SEL. And then we'll have a discussion that outlines a policy paper that FHI 360 wrote in collaboration with the UNESCO Global Education Monitoring Report on what those call to action points are. Once again, thank you all so much for coming. We hope that this content will be something that we can all chew on together and also make a meaningful contribution to children and youth in these challenging contexts. So Dima, I'd love for you to come up to kick off the event. Dima and I are going to have a conversation to set things in context about programs that she's been implementing in Afghanistan as they relate to SEL. So thank you, Dima. I'll head over. I'm coming over. So thank you very much for being here. This is our talk show host component of the event. I would love for you to talk a little bit more about who you are and the work that you do, just so that folks have a sense of the important work that you're doing in Afghanistan.
My name is Dimayram. I'm from Afghanistan. I'm working as a program implementation manager in one of the women-led organization in Afghanistan, Afghan Women's Education Center, and also I'm a champion for Malala Fund, and we are doing some advocacy work for child rights and child education in our country. And our organization is focusing for implementing projects in 7 provinces. And mostly we are covering the eastern part of Afghanistan, which is mostly unsecured. And we are providing some of education facilities for their families or for the children, mostly that they are IDPs, returnees, or those girls that they are a dropout from education. Yeah.
And tell me a little bit more about some of those main challenges that children and youth in Afghanistan face, specifically as it relates to their social and emotional well-being.
Actually, in Afghanistan, when we are talking about challenges, we have multi-layered of challenges. When it comes to the family level, we are seeing that due to poverty, culture, and social norms, most of the families are preventing their daughters to continue their education. When it comes to the poverty, it means that in Afghanistan, most of the families, they don't have house, they are just living in tents or in camps. So that's why they are not taking that much important education because they are saying that they are the only breadwinner of their family. So that's why they have to work. And when we talk about education system, in our education system, we have lack of financial and school construction, a lack of or poor quality of education that we exist in our system. And also lack of one of the important or more challenges that we face, which increase the number of dropouts for girls, is lack of female teachers. That most of the families were not allowing their daughters to taught by male teachers. For example, we can say that Paktika is one of the provinces which is in the eastern zone of Afghanistan, in which less than 2% of teachers are female. And now we can imagine that how hard it will be for the families to send their daughters there. And beside that, we have security problem or security issues that due to continuous conflict in our country increase the number of dropouts or closeout of schools in the provinces.
And how do some of those security challenges affect children?
Actually, there are many security challenges that we have. For example, in Afghanistan is a post-war country, or still conflict is going in some of the provinces that we are working on. Mostly there are conflict between 2 tribes as well, internally and also externally. Yeah.
And tell me more about the work that your organization does.
Actually, we are providing services. Actually, our organization is working for access to women's rights and providing access to education, quality education for women and girls in our country. And we are doing this by 2 ways: supporting women by providing them literacy program, women economic empowerment program, or leadership program for youth. And also we are providing accelerated learning education for IDP returnees or those children that they are drop out.
And different types of social and emotional supports that your organization provides. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, actually we are providing education, we are providing accelerated learning program for our children in our programs. It means that in 1 year the children are studying 2 grades. And when we are, for example, because the children that we are focusing are IDPs and returnees, it means that when they are in our education system, they face many problems within their families when they are suffering. So that's why our teachers are providing them some of the sessions with them. For example, the fun or entertainment entertainment games with them. Or sometimes it's very hard for the child to talk about what trauma that he or she is facing. So that's why we are using different methodology, or different techniques, or just we are letting them to draw whatever the child is thinking, and it will help us. It has two positive points. One, the child feel relaxed because whatever he or she is thinking, she just draw and release her frustration. And the second thing, it will give us an idea that from what stage that the child is running through that. And after that, we are referring that child to the counselor, to the special counselors, to work with that child.
Tell me a little bit more about some of those social emotional activities that you just described.
Actually, we are having different activities that we are doing. We are doing some role plays with our children in our education programs. We are having some dramas or dialogues or drawing competitions to feel so relaxed for the child, or focus group discussions that the children face.
Great. And how do you know that those types of programs are successful?
Actually, we are seeing this by the behavior of the child, that we are seeing that at the beginning, that from what stage he or she is suffering, but after that, when we see that his or her behavior is changed, so it will give us the positive sign. Or also we can follow up in this with their family, with the community that the child is living there.
And what types of programs and supports do you provide to families and communities who have also been affected potentially by conflict and crisis and displacement?
Actually, for the families and for the community, thank you. For the families and for the communities, we are providing some awareness session programs, because at the beginning we are just making them aware that how it is important for a child, for their parents to let their child to continue their education. And we are doing this in different ways. We are doing this by role plays, by community dialogues, providing them awareness, and mostly in our community dialogues or in role plays, we have an advocacy groups of youth people. They are just playing because it will help the community. Because whenever we are providing or we are conducting these kind of sessions, the people in the community are in different levels. They are literate, they are also illiterate. So whenever they are seeing that role play, they will never forget, and they are seeing that from what stage of life they are suffering. So that's why, with the time being, they are realizing that these are the issues, and we have to find a solution for that.
And are you providing different social emotional supports and activities for communities and family members? And if so, can you talk a little bit more what those look like?
Yeah, we are providing them the community-based dialogues that we are providing them within the community, and we are also providing them the role plays within the community, and also some of the radio programs for the community, because in Afghanistan, one of the things that works in the provinces, that people are listening to the radio. So in the radio, they are just doing some drama or some role plays there.
And I know that the Afghan Women's Educational Center, you folks work a lot with girls. Can you talk a little bit about how girls' social emotional needs may be different than other types of children?
Actually, in Afghanistan, when we are working, especially for girls, we are seeing that girls are the category of groups that they are suffering a lot, because whenever they are in the family, their families are not allowing them to go to continue their education. When they will be in the society, there will be cultural and social norms that the child are facing. For example, there are a number of early child marriages in the community due to social norms or wrong traditions. And it's all just because of the lack of awareness within the community, within the people, or the high number of illiteracy rate in the country.
What are some last minute messages or last key messages you'd like to leave for this audience today about children's social emotional needs in Afghanistan?
Actually, I just wanted to end my remarks by telling a story from one of our beneficiaries that I just met some years ago. A young lady, she was 12 years old, Maria. She was street vendor. She sell products in the market of Kabul. And I asked her that why you are not continuing your education, why you are not in school, why you are working on the street. She told me that I'm the only breadwinner of my family, and my family is not allowing me to continue my education. At the beginning, we had many problems with their parents, because their parents were not allowing her to continue their education. But with the rest of time, when we make the family realize that how it's important for Maria to continue her education for her better future. So Maria continued so successfully. She joined our education program, and after our accelerated learning program, we successfully reintegrated her into public school. And after completing her school, she completed her university, and now we can say that Maria is teaching in one of the schools, and she is teaching those children that are IDP and returnees, and I know that the stage that she go through, so she is doing her best for that children, and. This is just one story, but we want many more Marias in our country. So that's why we are here to share some of the real stories that we have in our that we have in the ground level, and we need your support for better future of girls in Afghanistan.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dina.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Dima Hiram from the Afghan Women's Educational Center. Thank you so much, and we were very grateful for you to be here with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great. I'm going to invite Bo Thompson, from the head of research from the LEGO Foundation, to the stage, and also Manos Antoninus, who is the director of the UNESCO Global Education Monitoring Report, and Kathleen Denny, who is a technical officer at FHI 360. We're going to now move into the next stage. After Dima's inspirational words, we're going to talk more about the state of social emotional learning and play, as well as the findings from the paper that we all published. So Bo, I'm going to leave the stage to you.
So thank you very much, Paul, and welcome everyone. I'm the Global Head of Research at the LEGO Foundation. The LEGO Foundation is aimed at building a future where learning through play can empower children to become creative and engaged lifelong learners. And our work is really about challenging where we are right now to redefine play and reimagine learning, and being able to increase the understanding on the importance of play, and in particular the huge benefits play has for families and children in these difficult circumstances and displaced settings that we see around the world, to develop skills similar to social emotional skills. And as we heard elegantly from Patrick this morning, basically the context is quite significant. We are dealing with almost running up to 100 million of people who are displaced worldwide. But what seems to be even more significant is that almost half of these people are children, young children, and they spend, as Patrick said this morning, a number of years in these displaced settings. And the average in this from UNHCR is around 10 years in these settings. And it means that they're basically spending time in these places in areas of conflict and disaster, and we know that in many cases these experiences are inherently traumatic and damaging, particularly for young children, where their young brains are developing and maturing, that living in such conditions is really harmful. And the stress that they have can have an impact, a lasting impact, both on their learning, their behavior, and their physical and mental health. So that's critical. And here's an example from some of our work in the LEGO Foundation. So last year we announced our first large-scale humanitarian initiative supporting Sesame Workshop, RAC, and IRC to help ensure children affected by the Rohingya crisis in Bangladesh and the Syrian crisis in Jordan to be able to support opportunities and for children to grow and learn through play. And this is an image from the Rohingya population. I think it's quite clear from what you see here what are the challenges. Basically, the lack of space outdoor means that children mostly play indoors with materials they can find, which is quite scarce at this point, but also the critical issues of human trafficking. So basically, children are taken away from these areas and often if families and children are not around each other. So we believe there's a huge need out there, particularly around what's critical in terms of the basic needs, of course, for food, care, and safety, but also engaging, joyful, stimulating environments for children. And as Dima elegantly mentioned this morning, basically the opportunities for play to bring relaxation and peace to the mind, but also supporting the growth of children and bring basic, simple activities to parents and caregivers under these circumstances. So social and emotional skills are particularly important. That for us is the foundation for children, not only in childhood, but for the rest of their lives. And this is a report from the Early Intervention Foundation, who reviewed some of the long-term effects, basically the relationship between social and emotional skills and in childhood and the adult outcomes. So when we say social and emotional, it's basically motivation, self-regulation, social skills, emotional health and resilience. And if one support these skills, you have better likelihood of mental and health outcomes, well-being, but also labor market, jobs, and socioeconomic status. So investing in social emotional skills in childhood have long-term benefits. And we know that's not only in early childhood, but also into school. So this is a review of longitudinal studies in that area, where social emotional skills in early childhood basically supports regulation of emotions and peer relationships, but also academic achievement all the way into primary and secondary school. If we look at school-based interventions, this is an analysis of more than 200 school interventions covering more than 250,000 of children. That says if you invest in social emotional programs in schools, you have 20% increase in social emotional skills, obviously, hopefully, but also you have 11% increase in academic achievement at the same time as you reduce distress and behavioral problems and you improve attitudes and pro-social behavior. So the critical needs of social and emotional skills. For us, the key opportunity is about play. So this knowledge around how children learn through play, we have consolidated that knowledge with our international partners over the past decades, and can with confidence say that it has a huge benefit in terms of the natural way that children learn, in terms of their enjoyment, engagement into meaningful activities where they collaborate with others. And first of all, as indicated from some of the examples here, it supports basic functions like self-control, attention, and emotional regulation. Almost like when you had to enter the password this morning, trying to keep attention to what were the numbers and letters and regulate emotions. Can I get it? And is it really important? So that basic understanding of play is really important. And it supports the basic things that allows you to learn and be school ready. But also it is play a mechanism for coping with stressful situations, managing anxieties, and also giving opportunities for expressing what you feel. And it's obviously used for play and social interactions, not only to develop social relations, but as a protective mechanism. And in these circumstances where we talk about right now, in displacement or serious incidences of stress and trauma, play is particularly important for traumatic events, but also quite recognizes play therapy as an approach to deal with stress and anxieties, And adults are particularly important. So if you don't deal with the caregivers and the parents, then it's difficult to reach the children, but that's also activities where you have opportunities to engage adults and caregivers. So I think it's fantastic when we see the moments around the world where we visit play labs and homes and schools where you use local materials, you try out ideas, and where children, families, educators are giving these kind of tools for play. So finally, we see this both as a global issue as well as a local issue. So last year we did a Play Well report looking across 9 countries. What are the basic needs around play and the perceptions around play? And it's quite clear that play do have a crucial role for families, in particular for well-being. But 38% of parents say they don't have the capacity and time to play enough in their homes and with their families, even though they say it's absolutely critical as a vital educational approach. So more than 7 out of 10 parents actually say that play is critical for children's learning. And if you look locally as an example from the Rohingya refugee camps, where Sesame Workshop just finalized a needs assessment this summer, the basic thing that the parents are saying, the caregivers are saying out there in the Rohingya camps is that seeing children play and being happy is the best thing that they find, along with getting children educated and ensure they're having food. So the basic things about food and care with play and learning is what families are looking for in these areas. And basically parents are striving for their kids to study and learn, and they feel they have the knowledge and skills, but they don't necessarily have the right support and the right materials and toys for doing that. And they do perceive play as important, but still slightly more on the cognitive side and attention and literacy and language than the social and emotional, which are at least as critical for what we do. So given what we know and what examples that are in here, and the initial stage, I just want to say thank you everyone for individuals and organizations who are doing a big effort in this area. It means a lot to us. It's a huge lift to make, and it's so important, particularly around the playful experiences. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Bo. We're going to now present the major findings of the paper, the UNESCO policy paper around social emotional learning. So Manos Antoninus is the director of the Global Education Monitoring Report, and Kathleen Denny is a technical officer at FHI 360, and I also work at FHI 360. We're going to run through what this call to action looks like based on the findings, so that together, as in partnership, we can all work towards these types of collective goals. Kathleen.
Great. So once again, my name is Kathleen Denny, and I've been working in education emergencies for the last about 4.5, 5 years, and have done a lot of work on social emotional learning, mostly in the Middle East, but now also in West Africa and Latin America. So just to kind of begin the conversation, we want to make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of what we mean when we're saying social emotional learning. So there are lots of different definitions out there. There are lots of different frameworks, but the framework we're going to kind of be referencing in this presentation is the CASEL framework, which stands for the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. So according to CASEL, social emotional learning is the process through which children and adults understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. So a lot of these different skills that are highlighted in the definition are going to be kind of falling under 5 core competencies of social emotional learning. So the first one we have is self-awareness. So this is an individual's ability to kind of identify their own strengths and weaknesses. Then we have self-management. So this is getting into kind of impulse control, a person's ability to stay organized. Then social awareness. So a person's ability to have empathy for others. Responsible decision making. So being able to identify problems and then problem solve. And then the last one is relationship skills. So being able to communicate and build positive relationships with peers and other relationships. So why is social emotional learning important? So Bo did a great job of kind of elaborating on this and how it connects to play, but in general, social-emotional learning is important in helping to address the trauma that children and youth have faced. So as we've already heard through earlier presentations, a lot of children in these contexts have either directly experienced trauma through exposure to conflict or to natural disasters, or they've been displaced and have gone through a lot of instability in their lives. So social-emotional learning really helps to give children skills in order to cope with that trauma, in order to heal from that trauma, and in order to sit in a classroom and be able to learn, pay attention, grow, and develop in a healthy way. So the idea behind social-emotional learning is to really build upon children and youth's resilience via explicit skills. So instead of viewing children and youth that have experienced traumatic events as victims, it's really building on the skills and assets that they already have, and just continuing to grow those through different types of activities and explicit instruction. So in terms of short-term outcomes, SEL, or social-emotional learning, really helps to mitigate the impacts of toxic stress. So children in these types of contexts, when they have prolonged symptoms of stress, it becomes toxic stress, and that really inhibits their ability to learn and to sit in a classroom. So in the short term, SEL really helps them to develop those skills that help them to pay attention, to focus, to regulate their emotions so that they can learn. And then that leads to longer term outcomes, which is education attainment, employment, health. Sorry, this is spastic. Health and stability outcomes. So now I'm passing on to Manos.
And I'm not sure whether I will stand because I think it will be up,
Okay.
kind of going up and down. So my name is Manos Antoninus. I'm the director of the Global Education Monitoring Report, which is an editorially independent report hosted and published by UNESCO, which since 2002 has been following progress towards the international education targets. And since 2015, with the mandate of the international community to monitor progress on education in the Sustainable Development Goals. And we are a team of about 20 people working in Paris from the UNESCO headquarters. And we have a very, very long tradition of collaborating very fruitfully on many different levels with FHI 360, to which we are grateful also for the collaboration for this event, but also for this policy paper, which I will explain in a minute how it came. In addition to the reports, the global reports, we also publish a series of policy papers among other issues. And we make an effort to focus on at least a couple of topics that featured in the global report, but maybe not at depth, or maybe they were not exactly clearly described in a way that would be useful for policymakers. And we identify the issue of trauma and the role of education in addressing this issue. We collaborate with FHI 360, more or less sharing the work with Paul's team, working, let's say, primarily on the emergency side of the challenge, and then the report looking particularly into the issue of addressing trauma in more or less high-income settings of places where displaced children actually settle. And there is plenty of evidence, of course, that the issue is significant, although estimates do vary. Here are two examples. In the Netherlands, between 13 and 25% of refugees and asylum seekers were identified with symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. In the Netherlands, there was also another example of Syrian refugees identified approximately with the same degree of prevalence of post-traumatic stress disorder, about 1 in 4. Among those internally displaced in Syria, 1 in 3 were identified, and in a place like Darfur, up to 75% of internally displaced children in camps were identified with symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, 38% with depression. So we're talking about, of course, a very significant problem. The tools don't always agree, but that's not enough to suggest that it's not a major issue. In fact, what convinced us that, as Patrick said, this was an important issue to draw attention to, was this striking finding that 73% of teachers in Syria at the beginning of the crisis said that they had absolutely no preparation and no skills to address children with trauma. And that's what convinced us that it was really an issue that deserved even more attention. A very interesting statistic or recommendation that came from the latest issue of The Lancet was that perhaps as much as 10% of total humanitarian aid should be spent on mental health and psychosocial support. You may have actually seen it on Friday. But education has a role to play, and that's what we wanted to particularly emphasize, because for many families, teachers may be the only professionals, and Dim, I think, suggested that also earlier, that they may come across. Or at the best of cases, if there is an infrastructure, at least teachers need to be prepared to be able to report, to refer children that suffer to those specialists. But sometimes these may not even be available. So let's go to the call for action, and maybe Kathleen can continue.
Great. So based on the paper and our research, we came up with specific action points. So the first one is to require rigorous research, monitoring, and evaluation on social-emotional learning. So we need to do more to study the impact of our interventions and to develop the tools that we use to measure those interventions. The second one is to promote learning through play and other modalities. So Bo mentioned the importance of incorporating play and social-emotional learning interventions, but there's other modalities like mindfulness activities, brain games, et cetera, and Paul will go into more detail about what those are. We need to localize SEL, so that means we need to make sure it's contextually appropriate to the different contexts that we're working in. And build self-reliance, so we need countries to own this process of building social-emotional learning into the curriculums, into teacher trainings, into national frameworks and things like that. And the last one is to invest in teachers and caregivers. So we need to make sure that we are, like I mentioned earlier, building it into teacher professional development, but also ensuring that our teachers and our caregivers' well-being is also being promoted, because teachers can't provide a safe space in their classroom where the children can learn SEL skills unless they themselves are well. So, yeah. Back to Manos.
So coming to the first call for action, it is, of course, you saw Bo's presentation. We do have a growing evidence base of rigorous research that really tells us that social and emotional learning interventions can have a positive impact on children and youth, not only in terms of their short-term academic outcomes, but more importantly, their long-term lifetime outcomes. However, and I'm not going to belabor the point, much of this evidence still primarily comes from the type of high-income, let's say, settings that I mentioned earlier that we covered in the policy paper. Inevitably, perhaps, this is really not surprising if you think that these are the conditions where research perhaps can take root. The conditions are right. One can experiment, one can try different things. In an emergency setting, things are, of course, much more complicated, and it's not always the case that we can identify the right conditions for proper research to happen. However, and that's coming next, when we try to prioritize, and please do know that point, when we come to select, and you remember what I'm saying, what is a priority, we still need to invest more resources for rigorous research, monitoring and evaluation in the programs that we design. Some of these programs are now increasingly well resourced, and we really need to identify and assign a considerable amount for convincing stakeholders that it is very important to invest. Because, of course, in many of these countries, the mode of teaching is very traditional. Asking people to break away from routine and rote learning and invest in other activities will require a lot of evidence and a lot of persuasion and a lot of advocacy. And that's why we need to invest in more rigorous research.
I'll jump in really quick about the second call to action. one of the things we had found was that there's so many different ways of delivering social emotional learning interventions. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a lesson plan that's explicitly SEL, for example. There are creative and recreational activities that that can be promoted. There are mindfulness-based activities that different organizations are currently implementing and testing, different executive function games, and also across sectors as well, and I'll get to that a little bit more. But play also seems to be kind of like the superfood of child development and of social emotional learning. It's this modality that really helps to not only deliver these types of messages that focus on these key skills, but also bring forth curiosity, creativity, bring forth that sense of lifelong learning and problem solving. And that's definitely, play-based learning approaches really need to be researched more, specifically in these contexts. And then SEL doesn't need to just be done during the school day. This could, social emotional learning activities can be school-based. They can include a whole school approach, they can include a classroom-based approach, but these are also activities that can be done in the home. They can be done also in after-school extracurricular activities, linking up with mental health and psychosocial support, so with child protection in the mental health sector, and those are conversations that are currently going on as well. So these are very important things to note, that there's so many different diverse ways of doing SEL programming, and those are things that we need to generate evidence on and not stick to just one aspect of doing SEL, such as scripted lessons, for example. In terms of the next call to action, we found that there is this urge to what we termed as localized SEL, which what I'm about to say might sound a little contradictory, but follow my logic for a second. We are all using a different social emotional learning language in the education emergencies community, which is problematic. It's problematic in terms of program implementation and coordination, and also in terms of research and comparing that research across contexts. So the education and emergencies community, we need to come together, partner together to really create a core framework of what we mean when we say social emotional learning. But that framework needs to be adaptable and flexible to be contextualized to different types of emergencies, also to different types of contexts and cultures, and bringing in different cultural understandings and adaptations of what social emotional skills mean in a specific context or across different contexts. And finally, social emotional learning also needs to be conflict sensitive. These can be highly nuanced and sensitive topics to address in conflict settings. So how do we ensure that our programs do not mitigate conflict, but actually do no harm and are conflict sensitive for different types of populations, such as girls or children with different disabilities, as well as different marginalized children. So that was a really big finding that came out of the paper.
Now, coming to the fourth call for action, before I start, I should also mention that as part of the preparation of the paper, we also received the very generous support of the Psychosocial Support Social Emotional Learning Collaborative of INE. Many members volunteered to review the paper and provide suggestions, for which we're really grateful. And one of those areas I remember now was suggestions over this particular section about the need to invest also on parents and caregivers. We know, of course, from the Interagency Standing Committee pyramid of psychosocial support that we need to receive. We know that communities are at the basis of psychosocial support interventions. Parents in particular, parents of children that are displaced, of asylum-seeking and refugee children, may well be struggling to support their children, often because they have been displaced to a place where they don't understand the language, they don't understand or maybe not even agree with the purpose of education. They may generally be struggling with the support that they need. However, the success of these interventions, of social emotional learning interventions, if you think about it, rely, and I think Paul already spoke to that point, not just on what is happening in the school, but also these extracurricular activities that require follow-up outside the school, outside the education setting. and the participation of parents is really crucial for ownership of the programs. There is an interesting example from the Better Learning program in Palestine. Ritesh Shah's team evaluated the intervention and showed that when parents were participating in a program together with teachers and counselors, then the effects on children's ability to cope with fear was much strengthened. And of course, we should also remember that parents and caregivers themselves, of course, suffer from stress and from post-traumatic stress disorder, even more sometimes than children. And there's a very interesting example. It's not exactly for an emergency setting, but in Chicago with Mexican migrant mothers and the stress they've gone through, and how support from nurses, but also from non-formal education program, helped improve the performance of their children in school. But this is generally about capacity building of the entire community, not just of the teachers. And remember, I made the point earlier about the need to invest in evidence and better evidence. Without evidence, it would be very difficult to achieve the last point, which is to build social and emotional learning into national curricula. So far, most of the interventions seem to be happening on the side. The big step forwards of convincing national education systems to adopt such interventions is still not within reach. We need to, therefore, to try very hard to make sure that these curricular interventions make it into the mainstream.
And the final recommendation, which for those who know me, this is my favorite recommendation, has to do with investing in caregivers and teachers, so supporting the supporters. And I'm going to talk more about teachers right now. Teachers are often kind of the forgotten beneficiary for different psychosocial support and social emotional programs. One of the things that we found is that teachers often feel under-equipped to appropriately support children and children with different symptoms of trauma. And that type of support on what teachers can do, where their roles stop and start, that's very important. Providing teachers with comprehensive professional development is also very important in these contexts. So we know that one-off trainings do not work. The teachers need coaching and peer support and follow-up for these types of technical interventions. And then teachers' own well-being, we've mentioned it multiple times on the stage. I'm very grateful for that. When teachers are not well, how can we expect teachers to stay in the profession, which is a very stressful one in emergency contexts? And also, how can we expect teachers to deliver and model social-emotional interventions that really depend on your own wellness to be able to deliver these programs? At FHI 360, we're working on a teacher well-being intervention that looks at stress management and mindfulness-based practices for 3,000 teachers in El Salvador who are impacted by high prevalence of gang violence. And this program, what we're finding is teachers are not only, one, thankful that there's a focus on them for once, but also these are things that they're trying to adapt to their classrooms as well. So that doesn't have to be an either-or situation where we're providing just social-emotional learning activities to students. There's ways to blend that where teachers can get that support. And we've developed a teacher well-being measurement tool that's being currently validated that will be a global good for the field so that these are interventions that can be prioritized. Bo, I'm going to pass it on to you in terms of next steps.
Thank you very much, Paul. So now comes the final session here. Next 3-5 minutes. Now, be sure you have 6 bricks. I think you had that when you entered the room here, because 6 bricks is something we use in the LEGO Foundation broadly in our programs. It's an ability to engage any audience, any child in the process of learning to develop skills. And we have a range of activities that can be used by parents and caregivers. What we're going to do here is using these simple activities for you to reflect on which call for action is most important to you. How would you prioritize among these fantastic ideas here? And there are 6 bricks and 5 calls for action. So when I say so, not yet, please consider that the red brick is you. You are the stable foundation for which you will build the call for action, prioritize what they are. So you will keep this at the bottom of the tower as you
to go out and help and advocate for these actions. And then you're going to build a tower with the remaining 5 bricks to prioritize the 5 calls for action. So basically, if you remember the colors, I think we have them at some point. So basically, if you prioritize rigorous research, monitoring, innovation, you put the blue at the top. If you prioritize play, learning through play, you put a light blue at the top. If you look at localizing, you put the, there's a green on the top. And if you put self-reliance, you put the yellow on top and orange on top. So please spend 2-3 minutes to build your own tower. You can talk to your neighbor, 2-3 minutes, build a tower that prioritizes your call for action. So your executive function have realized that self-reliance and investment can be both green and orange. You can decide, because it's you to carry forward the actions, but I suggest that green is localize, yellow is self-reliance. Okay, do we have it? So now please hold up your bricks and see what you have. We have towers. We also have some amazing creative ones who actually want to invest. Sorry, I'm pointing at you lady down there. Actually invest. Can you hold it up? You likely suggest to invest in all of them at the same time. That's really nice. What do we have? We have someone with orange at the top, investing in teachers and caregivers. We have some with yellow. We have some with blue, light blue, some with play. So any reflections on what you see of priorities up here?
I think the right one was yours, because they're all really interconnected, and that's precisely, I don't think our intention was to prioritize any particular activity over others. They are part of a mechanism that, if used judiciously, it can lead to the desired result. I put myself the green one because ultimately we really want to see these programs mainstreamed. We don't want them to continue being in parallel as something exotic and strange that should not be part of the everyday life of all children. Not really only the displaced, right? We want all children to benefit from social and emotional learning opportunities precisely because they lead to these long-term outcomes that we so much desire and which sometimes we see traditional education not being able to deliver.
Thank you. I think we're running out of time now, but please bring back your calls for action and the bricks to reflect on what you can do, and thank you for participating in that small exercise.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. That was our roundup related to our call to action. So in the future, what you'll be seeing a range of social media bursts around the call to action in the form of videos. There's a tripartite blog that's been sponsored between this partnership around what we believe are the next stages for social emotional learning. This is something we cannot do without coordination and partnership. We need to practice our own social emotional learning skills as a sector, as a field, to boost up this evidence base and to create these high impactful programs. We invite all of you to a reception now that's going to be happening above in the restaurant on the next floor above us to talk more about these call to action pieces. Thank you again for coming. We're very grateful for this audience and for your focus and your expertise. So thank you again, and have a good time at the reception. Thank you. And very quickly, just want to thank our partners at the LEGO Foundation as well as at the UNESCO Global Education Monitoring Report. Thank you once again for participating on this panel together. Have a good evening, everybody.